In this section, we're going to be taking a look at how we can make some insert mesh brushes and do some extra detail on these things and get some cool variations out of things. So I've gone ahead on this first design, and it was looking a bit mechanical to begin with, and I noticed from my lineup that this design out of all the rest of the designs didn't feel that much different from everything else, so I kind of pushed it more in this mechanical kind of way. So that gives me some new things to kind of play around with when I'm working with the insert mesh brushes that we're going to take a look at. So to get started with this, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the tool, and I'm going to use a polysphere. And if you don't have a polysphere loaded, you might have this sphere 3D. I don't really like the geometry on that, so I like to use this polysphere. And if you don't have that loaded, it's pretty simple. You can go ahead and just hit the comma key and open up the light box, and then we can go to the tool area and then go to polysphere, and then double click that and load that up, and that'll give you a polysphere to start working with. The next thing that we're going to do is go ahead and turn on symmetry. We've got X turned on, and then we're going to take a look at radial symmetry. So let me move some of these things out of the way, don't need them anymore. We're going to go to the transform tab and open that up, and I'm going to click this little icon, click and drag it over here so it's in the trough. And then now you can see we've got symmetry activated because we tapped X. And then I want to use this little R right here, and then this is going to give us radial symmetry. But right now it's doing radial symmetry along X, and I want to do it along Y. So it kind of goes like this. And with the radial count, we can pump that up to something like, let's give it a number like 60. So we've got 60 different brushes going around the surface here like that. And then now we can put it on a brush, like maybe we could try one of the H polish brushes. So to get to that, it's pretty simple. Just tap B and then H, and then the only brush that exist under H is this H polish. So now we can just start polishing this thing up, and we can build a surface like this. I'm going to try to maybe flatten this out a bit. The other thing I can do to flatten things is I can put it on the move tool, and I'm just going to click and drag straight up. So just click and then drag up, and I can hold shift. So let me get these out of the way right here and try to drag another one up here. So I just click and drag up, and if I hold shift, it'll just constrain it straight up like this. Now if we move this piece here, it'll kind of warp the whole thing, but if we drag the bottom one, we can actually take this thing and just push it to make a flat edge like that. I'll put it back on draw, and then we can keep going here for this, and I'm going to try to flatten this out a little bit like this in this area, and I'm going to flatten out the bottom. I think I'm going to do it quite a bit more like that. Just get something like this, put it back on the move transpose tool, and then drag this bottom piece here and flatten this thing up like that. So this is starting to be a fairly cool shape. And I'm just trying to do something that might look a bit mechanical, like some kind of inset that we can put into the mesh. And we might not have enough subdivision levels, so I'll hit Control D to add one more subdivision level. I was getting a little bit chunky there on the edges, and now you can see it's going to get nice and crisp at that point for us. So let's tighten that up just a little bit like that. Maybe we could even do a bevel on here. So let's push in just a little bit. I'll make my brush size a little bit smaller so I can get more of a bevel there on the edge. So that's looking closer to what I was hoping for on there. I can bevel along this portion right here, and here, and here. So basically my brush acts as an angle. If I've got that angle correct, I can start to build something like that. So that looks pretty cool. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to tap 1 to go to my standard brush. I just got that set for a hotkey. And then I've already got this set to stroke type drag rectangle, and I've already got this alpha set on here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off Radial Symmetry and then just tap X. And then at that point, I'm going to go ahead and draw on here. So I'm going to take it off this Y symmetry and just make sure it's on X at this point. And then let's go ahead and drag from here right in the middle. So you can see whenever I've got symmetry turned on, whenever it gets really close to the center, it just kind of snaps right to that. The other thing is I could be drawing somewhere over here, but if I want this thing perfectly aligned, I can turn on symmetry for Z as well. And so you can see now I've got these different brushes, and it'll, if I get the right angle on this, it will drag directly out from the center on there like that. My intensity is pretty high, so I'll tap U and then just drag this down quite a bit. And now I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to dig in to the model. So let's do this another time. I'll tap U and up the strength a bit on this. Then this time I'll just do positive instead of negative. Just keep building that up, something like that. And maybe I'll turn it back on this radial symmetry along this, and then use the Damien standard. And after that's drawn, I can just dig into this thing quite a bit. And I do have lazy mouse turned on, and I can turn down the lazy steps on that. So that actually sits under stroke. And if you go to lazy mouse, you can see here's the lazy steps. I just have pulled this off into my own custom interface just to get to that stuff pretty easily. So we got this. I'm going to hold down Alt and then drag up or pull up a little bit on the surface like that. Okay, and I could do some design type of things on here. That's a possibility as well. So we could do something like that. So just taking a look at it, making sure it looks pretty cool. I think I've got just too many of these radial counts, so I'm just putting that at 30, so maybe what I'm getting inside of here isn't quite repeating so much on here. So hold on Alt, drag out a little lip here and here like that, and really this thing's going to be probably fairly small in the model, so I don't have to get super crazy with the amount of detail that's going on this thing. So it can be a little bit more gestural. And just trying to explore some ideas with this and see what actually looks cool. And maybe I'll drag just a few up like that. No, I'm not really digging that. Okay, so I know I want to have some kind of split going down the middle, so if I hold down Control, I can drag a marquee right through the center, just like that. And if I want to take away, I can hold down Control and add Alt to it, like this. And then I'll inverse that mask, Control I, like this. And I'm going to go ahead and add to this mask. I'm going to hold down Control and drag out to right here. I'm just trying to get this part isolated. And then I'll just use the Move tool. Actually, I've got some of the mask down here on the bottom that went through the model like there, so I can just hold down Control and add to that mask like that. And so I just have that piece isolated now, and I can hold down this Move button right here, and then we already clicked and dragged it up, but we can just do that again and hold down Shift and make a straight line, and then click here with this middle thing and then just pull this down like that. So I'm just checking the topology just because it's fairly rough on there, like that. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and I could just leave it. I can try smoothing that just a little bit and seeing what I get for that. And I'll just put it on the Damien standard brush. If I hold down Alt, I can raise up. If I hold down Shift, I should be able to draw a straight line going straight across like that. Something like that. So I'll dig into the surface. Let me get this straight. And hold down Shift while I'm drawing to draw those straight lines. And again, I think this is going to be fairly far away, so I don't think I have to be super picky about what this thing looks like. I could do something like this, try to mask this out a bit more, and if I hold down Control and Alt and click on the mask, I can sharpen it, and I'll inverse that and then put on the move, the transpose tool, and then we've already got that line established. If not, you can just click and drag out holding down Shift, and I'm going to use this middle circle thing right here like that and drag that down. It looks like it was a little bit tearing out the mesh a little bit, so I'm just holding on Control and clicking on the mask and I'll smooth it, and I can put it back on the move tool and push that down just a little bit, and I'll deselect, Control D, to deselect, just drag a marquee in the open viewport here like that. I think that looks fairly decent. Like I said, it's not super clean, but I think I'm going to keep it at a fair distance, and I'm just trying to add a few little details to this thing. So the other thing is I think I want to squish this thing just a little bit. So I'm going to tap P to turn off perspective and then just draw out a straight line like this with the transpose tool. Again, we can flatten this thing from the top. If we're going the wrong direction, we could flip it around like this, holding down Shift. And then now if we drag this thing, it'll come from the bottom. So that thing is nice and flat on the bottom. So it's going to click and drag out again, holding down Shift, and then I can take this top one and I could squish the whole thing if I wanted to do that. So I'll turn that off and get the radial symmetry turned off as well. So if we look at the density of this, that's fairly high. So what I could do with this is go to the Z plugin, and I'll dock that over. So I just click that little button, or just click and drag it over, and I'm going to use Decimation Master, and I'm going to say preprocess current. Should go fairly quick for getting that through, and then once that's done, then I can decimate it by a percentage, so I can drop it all the way down to 10% of whatever the total poly count is, or 12. 12 seems to be a pretty good number, so I can, after I've pre-processed and put this number to 12, I can say decimate current, and you can see now, here's what it does. It takes the geometry and lowers it quite a bit, but visually it still looks about the same as what we had before. So now if I want to turn this into an insert brush that I can just click and drag out multiple copies of this thing, I'm going to go straight above and choose a camera like this, and then hold down Shift just to snap it like this. When you have your camera looking straight down on this thing, this is how this thing is going to kind of grow out from the surface, depending on your camera view that you do right now. And to turn this into insert mesh brush, it's really easy. Just tap B for your brushes, and then you can say create insert mesh, just like that. And you can tell it to make a new insert mesh brush, like that, and I'll build a little icon for you and everything. And as long as you don't have subdivision levels on your model, you can just click and drag out, and now you can drag copies of this thing. So once you get done with it, you can save the brush. We can save it right here. We can go and there's actually an area that you can edit brush credits if you want. So you could put your name here if you wanted, like this. And then you could also even give a link to like your website or something like that. Just like that. And then that way anybody, if you give this brush away or whatever, they can always find you as an artist and everything. So after you got those credits made, you can just say save as, and then I've got a folder structure that I just store all the different stuff that I make in a tools directory. So I got brushes in my own folder, and let's see, I think I've got I've actually got brushes, and I think I've got insert brushes, yeah, in my own insert brush. So this is I'll just hit save for that, and now that brush is saved off. And now what I can do is, since that brush is made, I can go back to my object that we had, go back to the body for this thing, and I want to start using that insert mesh brush on this model. The only thing is you can't use the insert mesh brush whenever it's got subdivision levels. So let's take a look at the mesh, and you can see under geometry we got subdivision levels. So if I click and drag out, it's going to tell me the mesh has layers. I also have layers, so that's not a good thing either. So what I can do, I can just go to the subtool, and I can go ahead and I could duplicate it like this. It'll take a second. And once it's duplicated, might as well just rename this thing and make sure this is the right one that's being added here, and I got all my layers and everything else like that, and subdivision levels. So let's select this one that's right below it and check that one. If we made a duplicate, still got the layers, still got the subdivision levels and everything. So we could pick either one. I guess I'll pick this top one. It puts a 1 at the end of it, and just rename it. And then so I'll just hit the arrow key to the right just to get my cursor over here, and I'll just call this design 1 flat, like that, so I know that this one doesn't have any subdivision levels because I'm going to get rid of this stuff. So I can go to my layers, and let's bake all of our layers so it just flattens everything. Now just fill it with a black color, so we can fix that. Also geometry, I'm going to delete lower, so I don't have any subdivision levels. And then now I've got this color selected over here. You can fill it with whatever color you want and just say color fill object, like that. And I believe what was going on is the whenever we flatten the layers, they got rid of any kind of polypaint information on it, so maybe just got confused for a second. So now that that's done, I can actually hide this thing, and I'm just working with this piece here. And then now I can start to click and drag out, and you can see that we've got these different insert brushes, right? The other thing we can kind of mess around with that's kind of cool is, let me close that up real quick, and this one up. We're going to go to the brush settings and then click and drag that over so we can see some settings for the brush. And you can see we've got a depth slider, so if we pull that thing down, we can actually have it embed into the mesh a bit further. So if you wanted that thing to go down even further than what we've got going on, we could slide that thing down underneath this plane here. This represents like the surface that you're pulling out from. So I'm going to click and drag out like this. You can see it's quite a bit more flat now, and it's underneath that surface. So I think I want something right around maybe there, like this. And I'll make my brush size about the size that I want to pull this thing out at. If I hold down Control, it'll make it snap to the size of that brush. Why that becomes pretty cool is if I wanted this brush to be the same exact size up here, I could just hold down Control when I drag out up here, and it's going to make this new insert mesh brush the exact same size as what we had down here. And so if I want to add another copy up here, make it the same size, just hold down Control, and we've got the same size brush. Now it does look like they are different sizes, so let's talk about this real quick. So if I tap S and we have this dynamic slider on, I believe that might help here. So if I come up here and just hold down Control when I drag out, I can drag out these copies, and I can actually rotate them as well. And then now it's going to try to keep these the same size on the mesh, like this. Okay, so this is looking kind of cool. So that's basically the process for creating one of these brushes and then putting them on the model. Now you can see whenever we turn on our polyframe, it's actually giving these things different polygroup information for this. That comes in handy because we can go ahead, I'm just going to put my brush on the standard brush real quick, so I'll tap 1. We can actually hide this mesh right here. Just hold down Control and Shift and click on it, and it's going to hide everything else except for this part of the body. And then we can hold Control and Shift and click on this again, like that. And when we do that, it's going to give us the inverse of what we're looking at. So we'll basically have all of our different mesh insert brushes at that point. And when we have that, we can do a couple different things for splitting. We could either turn those all into one big giant polygroup and then split it, or we could just split hidden. So here's our different things here. If I hit Control W, it'll actually just make polygroups from whatever is visible. And if we go under Tools, you can see it's under here, under Polygroups. It's the same thing as doing Group Visible right here. So I'm going to hit Control W like that, and it's going to group those right here like this. Now I can hold down Control and Shift and click in the open viewport, and it'll bring everything back. And then now you can see the body's one big giant polygroup, and then everything else, all those little details that we've added through the insert mesh brushes, are another polygroup. And then we can go to Subtool, and there's split operations. So we can do split unmasked. So if you've got masked things, you can split it by things that are masked, or if they're unmasked. Or you can do it by group split. Or if things are hidden, you can say split hidden. So there's a lot of different options for how you can take this model and split it apart. But since I made the polygroups, I'll just use this group split. Now I'll say OK for that. And then now you can see, I'll turn off polyframe. It looks like the same exact model, except for now these pieces have been split off all by themselves, and I put it on that solo. You can see these pieces are all alone. So what that gives us is, if we turn off solo and turn this off and turn this back on, we still have a version of our model that has all of our layers and everything else like that. But then now we're starting to build up a library of different design pieces. So we can actually select this and then move it down in the stack here like this underneath the body, and then we could build up 3 different versions of this: body design 1, 2, and then 3. And then we would go for the second design, body design 2, 1, 2, and 3, and so on like that. So I'd have to give it a name, something like this, where I'd have to rename this and say body design 1, version 1, something like that, and enter. So that's the process for adding these insert mesh brushes and getting them separate. I'm going to put it in a time-lapse mode and build these things out and you'll see the final results of these things.